This is a translation and reproduction of conversations with Iranian philosophers like Dr. Ibrahim Dinani and Dr. Esmail Mansouri Larijani. Some concepts or details may not be fully conveyed. We apologize in advance for any discrepancies. Your feedback and suggestions for improvement are most welcome.
Welcome back to Wisdom Unveiled. This is episode 6, and we're continuing our deep dive into the philosophical heart of Hakim Abul Qasim Ferdowsi's work. You know, when you mention Ferdowsi, most people immediately think Shahnameh, the epics, the heroes, the battles.
Right, the sheer scale of it all, the narrative.
Exactly, and that's huge, of course.
Yeah.
But what we're exploring here, drawing from these fantastic sources, is that Ferdowsi embedded this incredibly deep, philosophical, even spiritual worldview right from the start, like from the very first lines.
And that title, Hakim Sage or Philosopher, it's not just a nice label they gave him later. It's absolutely key. The sources really emphasize this. They talk about the Shahnameh not just as history or epic, but as muhakat, a truthful, poetic representation of reality itself.
Muhakat. That sounds significant. Not just telling stories, but reflecting truth through poetry.
Precisely. He uses the form, the language of Hamasa, the epic, heroes, courage, high stakes, as the actual vehicle for these really profound philosophical ideas. It's philosophy dressed in epic verse.
Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive then, to kind of peel back those layers of story.
Yeah, get past just the narrative surface.
And really uncover that philosophical foundation he's building, to understand Ferdowsi as this deep thinker, this Hakim that these sources portray.
To find that intellectual and spiritual core that really informs the whole massive work.
So talking about Hamasa the epic, what does it actually mean philosophically here? It's got to be more than just, stories about fighting bravely.
Oh, much more. Philosophically, Hamasa is tied deeply to human aspiration. That drive we have to aim high, to reach for something more.
Okay.
And to make that aspiration real, you need two things. Intellect, karad, to even conceive of higher goals and figure out the path.
Right, the how. Encourage garaz, the sort of inner strength to actually pursue those goals, especially when things get tough. The epic form, then, is like the ultimate expression of this highest aspiration, shown through courageous action against huge challenges.
And the sources point out this massive difference right away, don't they? Something that sets Ferdowsi's world apart from, say, Greek tragedy.
The fundamental bedrock difference.
Which is?
Tawhid, the absolute unity and oneness of God. Strict monotheism. The entire worldview of the Shahnameh rests on this single principle. Think about Greek myths or tragedies. Conflict often comes from, a whole bunch of gods squabbling or unavoidable fate.
Or just human flaws leading to disaster where rights clash.
Exactly. Multiple powers, often at odds. But in Ferdowsi, even when you see these huge struggles like Yazdan, the force of good, versus Ahriman, the force of evil, it's framed totally differently because of Tawhid.
How so? How does Tawhid change that dynamic?
Crucially, Yazdan is seen more like an angelic force, working within the divine will. Ahriman is like the principle of evil, a sort of Satan figure. But, and this is the profound bit, God is completely transcendent, utterly above and beyond this struggle that happens within creation.
So God isn't a player in the game, not like Zeus taking sides.
Not at all. God transcends both Yazdan and Ahriman. The ultimate reality isn't caught up in their fight. God is the source of all being, the ground of existence itself, not just another character on the stage. And this theological stance shapes absolutely everything that follows.
Wow, okay. That is a huge shift in perspective compared to a lot of ancient epics. So let's look at those opening verses themselves. The sources say they're just packed with these ideas right from the get-go.
They really are. No warm-up. The very first line, in the name of the Lord of life and wisdom.
Yan and Karad, life and wisdom.
Yes, linked together intrinsically from the poem's first breath. It suggests that real life, meaningful life, is lived through wisdom, through intellect. They're not separate things. One informs the other, elevates it.
And then he immediately talks about limits, doesn't he? Something about thought, not being able to go further.
Exactly. Thought cannot pass beyond this. It's a direct statement about God's transcendence. The ultimate reality, God's essence, is just beyond what our human concepts can wrap themselves around.
Our finite minds trying to grasp the infinite.
Pretty much.
Yes.
Our ideas, our mental boxes, they reach a limit, a ceiling, when faced with the infinite, the absolute. It's like trying to hold the entire ocean in a cup. The ocean's real, but the cup can't contain it.
And this isn't just about thinking, it applies to our senses too. The viewer cannot see the creator.
Right. Our physical senses, sight, hearing, touch, They're tools for the material world, the world of shapes and limits.
Yeah.
They're just not the right equipment for perceiving the transcendent reality of God. You can't see God with your eyes.
But then comes that really fascinating line the sources highlight. But he perceives vision.
Ah, yes. That one makes you stop and think.
It does. He perceives vision. What's the deeper layer there?
It's incredibly deep. It suggests God perceives the very reality of seeing itself. Not just what is seen, but the fundamental nature of perception, the awareness, the ground that makes any seeing, any consciousness possible at all. Our ability to see, to be aware, is presented as maybe a reflection or manifestation of his absolute ultimate perception.
So our awareness is kind of rooted in his ultimate awareness.
In a way, yes.
Hmm.
But our physical tools, our eyes, they can't grasp his perception or even the deep reality of our own seeing on their own. They need intellect, karad, to interpret what they take in, to point towards the meaning, the reality behind the appearance.
He also uses riddles like Lord of Names, Sahib Nam, and Lord of Place, Sahib Jah. What do those add to the picture?
Sahib Nam suggests God possesses all the divine names, the attributes like merciful, powerful, knowing that we use imperfectly to try and understand aspects of the divine. Sahib Jah points to God as the ultimate source, the ground of all being, the place from which everything originates and finds its reality.
But then, circling back to transcendence, he immediately says God is higher than name and sign and conjecture.
Absolute crucial. Even those names, those concepts like merciful, while they point towards something real, are still our tools, our limited human ways of relating. They can gesture towards God, but God's actual essence is always beyond any label or category we can create.
Okay, so we have life and wisdom linked, God's transcendence beyond thought, senses, and names. What's the next big foundational idea he brings in right at the start?
He introduces the creator of the elevated jewel, the Gohar Jeremiah.
The elevated jewel. What's the philosophical read on that?
According to the sources, this is poetic language for the first intellect, the Aqwal al-Awwal. This connects with a major stream in Islamic philosophy and cosmology, the idea that the very first thing God created was intellect.
So he's not just talking about our human smarts, he's putting intellect right at the very beginning of the cosmic order.
Exactly. It establishes the absolute primacy of intellect, karad, not just as something humans have, but as the first principle of creation in the worldview he's laying out.
And he uses that beautiful metaphor, the eye of the soul, cheshmion.
Think about how we use that idea that someone has a good eye for detail or quality. Physical eyes see the outside world, the surface, the forms, but the soul's eye, intellect, that's what really perceives meaning, interprets what's real, understands the value behind what the physical senses report.
So without intellect, sight is just raw data, maybe even confusing.
Precisely. It lacks clarity, lacks understanding of what's truly important or real. Intellect is what lets the soul truly see the deeper reality, not just the surface show.
And this connects to another key function of intellect the sources mention as the ultimate measure, using words like sanjad, mizan, payman.
Yes, scale, balance, measure, proportion. The core idea is that intellect is the fundamental yardstick for understanding and ordering reality. Any system, any law, any scientific principle, even the act of measuring itself their validity ultimately traces back to the intellect that conceived them. It's the basis for order and proportion in the world as we can grasp it.
And this connects directly to justice, to dad.
Absolutely. Justice isn't just seen as some external legal code. It's inherent in the divine order itself. God is fundamentally just Dad Vargar. And its intellect, by recognizing measure, balance, proportion, knowing the right place for things that allows us to understand and try to enact justice in the world. Injustice then comes from messing up that divine measure.
Which brings us to that powerful line. Wise is the one who is powerful. Dina asan kitawanabad.
A really critical distinction there. Real power, real capability, true effectiveness. It doesn't just come from brute force. It comes from wisdom, from being Dana.
Because power without wisdom could be chaotic, even destructive.
Exactly. True effectiveness comes from knowing what to do, how to do it, and why. It also touches on practical wisdom, like knowing the difference between real need and just endless greed. Greed is power without measure, right?
Yeah.
It never ends, so you're always feeling needy, no matter how much you have.
And what about the line, from knowledge, the old heart becomes young? What's Ferdowsi getting at there?
It's not about physical age. It's about the inner self, the heart, the core of who you are. It's knowledge, Danesh, that keeps that inner self alive, perceptive, dynamic, young in spirit. It allows for clear sight, for continuous learning, and it provides guidance, not just for yourself, but potentially for others too.
But you don't just passively receive this wisdom, you have to actively go after it, Poyon.
Absolutely. You have to seek it, pursue it, look for knowledge and those who have it. And knowledge itself, danesh niayad, be banned. It can't be bottled up or contained. It's infinite. But like water from a spring, it doesn't do you much good if you don't have a way to receive it. You need an open, receptive ear, gush.
Okay, let's shift to how Ferdowsi actually describes creation in these opening parts. He mentions the letters Kaf and Nun.
Ah, yes. KN, forming the word kun.
From the Quranic command, be, and it is.
Exactly. Be, and it becomes. Ferdowsi uses this to highlight the absolute instantaneous nature of God's creator command. There's no gap, no delay.
Instant. The command is the action.
Precisely. As the source puts it, Beshawan, the command be, is the becoming. There's no lag time between the divine word and existence appearing. It underlines that God's command, his word, is his action, not just a sound made in time.
Ferdowsi also seems to put a lot of emphasis on time, zaman, and place, zaman, right there at the start.
Very much so. He stresses temporal time, zaman, as something that happens within place, within the land, zaman. Time in this physical created world is all about passing, flux, kazaru budan. It's constantly changing, moving.
And this is different from eternity.
Completely different from the eternal realm, sarmed, where there's no change, no beginning, no end.
So he's setting up two kinds of time right away.
Essentially, yes. There's the temporal, finite time, Quran, which flows within limits. Ferdowsi poetically says it carries away, brings back, makes old, makes new. It's the engine of decay, but also renewal in the physical world. And then there's eternal, infinite time, Akaran, which our worldly time flows from, but which is itself unchanging.
And this idea of time unfolding in place, in the land, this is where the sources find that incredibly powerful connection Ferdowsi makes between land and identity.
Yes, this link is absolutely fundamental to the Shahnameh's whole vision. Ferdowsi explicitly ties the land, the homeland, Fatan, Sarzamin, to the identity, the Hoviyat of the people, their time, their history, their collective memory, their very name and character, all bound up with their land.
So losing the land isn't just losing territory on a map.
It's losing the container of your collective being, your history, your name, your identity. You're left adrift with only Nang, which means disgrace, shame. It's presented as a kind of spiritual and existential emptiness.
Which explains that incredibly stark line. Whoever gives his whole body to be killed is better than giving the world, meaning the land, to the enemy.
Yeah, that line just stops you. Losing the land is framed as worse than physical death because it's the death of your collective time, history, and identity, everything that defines you as a people. It's a powerful statement about the sacredness of the homeland as the vessel of a people's existence.
Okay, let's tackle another huge philosophical question the sources raise based on this opening. The nature of good, Niki, and evil, bad. Are they like equal and opposite forces battling it out forever?
From Ferdowsi's perspective, firmly rooted in Tawhid, the unity of God, the answer is a definite no. Good and evil are not equal players. God, in his absolute reality, creates only good. There's a saying, Allah la yakhluqu shar. God creates nothing that is inherently evil.
Okay, so if God only creates good, where does evil actually come from then?
It's understood to arise from tongya.
Tongya, that sounds like tightness, constrict.
Exactly. Constriction, tightness, limitation. It's seen as the inherent nature of this finite realm of time and place. In this created world, defined by limits, friction just happens. Like trying to fit too many things in a small box, things clash, rub against each other. This inherent limitation, combined with human choices that go against the divine order, against that measure we talked about, that's where injustice, conflict, wrongdoing, what we call evil, emerges.
So evil isn't some separate dark thing created alongside good.
That's the key point. It's not a co-equal force. It's a consequence of things existing within the reality of limitation and the choices people make within those limits. But importantly, the epic does point towards the ultimate triumph of Yazdan, of the good. There's a sense that this limited temporal time will eventually resolve or transform into eternal time, free from that constriction and the conflict it generates.
Let's shift gears slightly to another crucial theme the sources pull out. The unity of religion and knowledge, Dinwa Danesh. They mention a section praising the Prophet Muhammad in the Shahnameh, right?
Yes, and it's a really significant section because it shows Ferdowsi's own deep faith. The sources confirm he was a devout Muslim, and specifically identify him as Shia, pointing to lines like the famous one, "I am the city of knowledge, Ali is its gate," as strong evidence for his specific beliefs within Islam. He's presented as someone deeply committed to preserving Persian culture and history while also being a profound believer.
And the really important takeaway from this, according to the sources, is that din wa danesh, religion and knowledge or intellect, are shown as inseparable.
Absolutely intertwined. You can't really have one without the other in a meaningful way. Religion without knowledge or intellect, a quill, can become empty ritual just going through the motions, maybe even dogma without understanding. It lacks fruit.
And knowledge without religion.
It gets reduced. Min-hated is the term used, focused only on the material world. It loses its connection to deeper meaning, purpose, the ultimate reality. There's that powerful saying cited, La ding liman la ak. There was no religion for one who has no intellect. Ferdowsi, to the epic language of Hamasa, really embodies this unity.
It makes me think of that philosophical definition of the human, Haywan and Natek, the speaking animal.
Indeed. That definition values both our physical nature and our rationality, our capacity for meaningful speech, Nutwick. The sources express concern about what they see as a modern tendency to kind of slide down from Natek, from rationality and meaningful communication towards just Haywaniyat, focusing only on animalistic drives and material stuff. True human growth, in this view, is the journey upwards from animality to rationality, using intellect and meaningful speech to elevate our existence.
And the prophet's speech, Gaftar Pegambar, plays a crucial role here, according to the sources.
Because it's understood as divine revelation, Tanzil and Why, it's presented not just as wise words, but as the very speech of God, Sokane Kodavant. The speech gives meaning, direction, the framework for right and wrong, through Ammar and Nahi, command and prohibition. And these divine shoulds and should nots, they aren't arbitrary. They come from the creator of intellect itself. So divine law aligns with the deepest reality accessible through reason, guided by revelation.
And Tanzil and Why themselves imply something coming down, right? From above.
Exactly. They signify a descent from a higher divine realm, the realm of ultimate truth, down into the prophet's heart, and then expressed in human language. This speech isn't ordinary. It carries the reality of its divine source, and it's the key to understanding that divine measure we keep coming back to.
Let's go back to that line. I am the city of knowledge. Ali is its gate. The significance of Bab, the gate. What's the deeper meaning there?
Bab, gate, is such a potent symbol. A gate means openness, gushadegi. What happens if a gate is slammed shut? If all gates are closed, you get stagnation, isolation, no way in or out. If a person is closed off to reality, to truth, to wisdom, to other people, well, the sources suggest it leads to a kind of spiritual death, intellectual rigidity, and ultimately conflict.
So Ali, being the Bab, the gate, represents this essential openness.
Precisely. He's seen as Babala, the gate of God, the gate of mercy, the gate you need to pass through to access the deeper meanings of prophethood, revelation, and ultimately to draw closer to God. Entering through this gate signifies embracing that crucial openness to truth, to reality, to divine guidance.
And the opposite is closed, locked thinking, najushudegi.
Exactly, versus open thought, gushadeji. And closed thought is portrayed as incredibly dangerous. The sources argue pretty strongly that it's a fundamental root cause of conflict, violence, war, both historically and today. When minds are closed, there's no room for real understanding or empathy. Openness, though, brings liberation, understanding, the possibility of peace. Conflict is almost seen as the inevitable result of constricted, closed thinking.
The sources also briefly mention the phrase, this speech is his secret, in relation to Ali. What's the idea behind that?
Yeah, the expert speaker points out that wilayat, that concept of spiritual guardianship or authority, particularly associated with Ali, is considered a raz, a secret, a mystery. It's not laid out explicitly in the same way the Sharia, the divine law, is. It hints at deeper, more esoteric levels of understanding accessible to the al-raz, the people of the secret, those with profound spiritual insight.
Interesting. Like hidden depths.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a quick mention that the connection between Ra's secret and Avaz, sound, is a whole other fascinating area, hinting that maybe these hidden realities have some connection to how they manifest or perceived, perhaps through sound or vibration. But that's noted as a topic for another time.
And there was also the idea of Iran, or Iranian identity, acting as a zarf, a vessel.
Yes, the idea that the land and the culture historically served as a kind of zarf, a container or vessel for nurturing and spreading certain kinds of spiritual and mystical Islamic thought, especially within the Shia tradition, out into the world. It acknowledges the role Iranian thinkers played over centuries in cultivating and sharing these ideas. So the land becomes more than just geography. It's a vessel for a specific kind of knowledge and spirituality.
Okay, so bringing all these incredibly rich threads together, we've talked about the limits of knowing, creation, intellect, language, time, place, land, identity, good, evil, the divine measure, religion, and knowledge. Where does it all lead? What's the culmination in Ferdowsi's worldview, according to these sources?
It all culminates in ubudiyat, or ibadah,
Hmm.
which means servitude, worship, devotion to God. After going through that whole journey, recognizing our limits, understanding creation, seeing the primacy of intellect guided by revelation, understanding our place as dependent beings the necessary, the highest response is this state of acknowledging God's absolute reality and our own fundamental dependence.
It's described as consciously tying the belt of servitude.
Yes, it's an inner realization, an acceptance of our inherent neediness, our inability to fully grasp God's infinite essence just by ourselves through our own limited efforts.
And this isn't just about external actions, it's an inner state.
Exactly. A deep, conscious acceptance of our reality before the absolute. And here's where that amazing paradox comes in. Admitting this limitation, acknowledging this helplessness before God's absolute reality is described as the highest knowledge, Marifat.
Wait, realizing what you can't fully know or do, that's the peak of knowing.
Precisely. Recognizing and confessing that limit, that fundamental dependence, is presented as the very summit of genuine knowledge of Marifat. It leads to that saying mentioned, servitude is a jewel whose essence is lordship. Al-ubudiyatu jaharatun kanhu arububiyah.
That sounds completely backwards at first. Servitude reveals lordship.
It's a mystical or philosophical insight. By fully embracing your reality as a limited, dependent being, your servitude, you gain insight into the nature of absolute, independent reality, God's lordship, Rububiyah. Knowing your relative nothingness helps you perceive God's absolute allness. Humility, born from recognizing truth, opens a door that pure, striving intellect alone might miss.
And this connects back to the purpose of creation mentioned in the Quran.
Yes, exactly. That verse, I did not create the jinn and humans except that they may worship me. Philosophically, mystically, in these interpretations, that they may worship me, liyabudun, is often understood to mean that they may know me, liyarifan.
So worship isn't just following rules, it's the natural outcome of deep knowledge and self-understanding.
Yes, it's seen as the necessary result of truly getting at understanding our reality, our limits, our place in the grand scheme. And this state of ubudiyat, of deep knowing and acceptance, inherently includes profound sipas, gratitude.
Gratitude just for existing, and especially for the tools like intellect that allow this understanding.
Absolutely. Gratitude for the sheer gift of being, and especially for the gift of intellect and the divine guidance that make this whole journey of understanding possible. It's even framed as an intellectual obligation. Wajib Akli reason itself should lead you to gratitude for these gifts. But, as the Quran points out and the sources remind us, truly grateful people are few. It requires constant awareness, a conscious effort.
It really is incredible how Ferdowsi seems to have woven this entire integrated worldview, theology, epistemology, cosmology, ethics, mysticism, right into those opening lines.
So it's all there, connected.
Right.
It shows exactly why he's called a hakim, a sage. He wasn't just kicking off a story. He was laying down a complete spiritual and intellectual foundation that gives meaning to everything else in the Shahnameh.
It really drives home that idea in this view that knowing and being aren't separate categories.
No, they're fundamentally linked. Just like God's essence is inseparable from his knowledge.
Yeah.
For us, awareness, genuine understanding, it changes our very mode of existence. Understanding reality at this level changes how you are.
And approaching the Shahnameh with this philosophical lens, guided by these sources, it must completely change how you read the epic stories that follow. It gives them a whole new depth.
It provides the underlying why for all the human struggles, the triumphs, the tragedies depicted.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the philosophical start of the Shahnameh, drawing on these interpretations, maybe here's a thought for you, the listener, to take away. It kind of builds on this really powerful idea we've been exploring, that recognizing limits, accepting what we can't fully grasp or control with our usual ways of thinking, that maybe that is a path to a different, deeper kind of knowing. Think about an area in your own life right now. Could be anything, a complex problem at work, a difficult relationship, feeling stuck creatively, a big decision looming somewhere you feel like you're hitting a wall, feeling limited, uncertain, maybe even a bit helpless.
Yeah, we all have those areas.
Maybe you've been trying really hard to analyze it, force a solution with sheer intellect, or willpower, or just doing the same things over and over, and it's just not shifting. What might happen if, instead of just pushing harder down that same path, you consciously tried to, well, lean into that feeling of limitation, that sense of humble acceptance, maybe, for the sheer complexity of it, or the parts that are truly beyond your control.
Facing the I don't know.
Exactly. Could really acknowledging, I don't actually have all the answers here, or I can't fully control this outcome, could that difficult step, that acceptance, actually open up a different way of seeing the whole thing, a different kind of connection, perhaps, or maybe even reveal a different path forward, one you couldn't even see when you're just focused on trying to conquer it with the tools you already had?
It's quite a shift in perspective, isn't it? Moving from that drive to dominate or figure everything out towards a space of...
Well, acknowledging the boundaries, the limits. What might emerge from just allowing yourself to sit with that space, that acknowledged limitation, instead of constantly fighting it? Something to ponder, perhaps. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.